marking. How do you handle all of the marking?
Well, a few things. Again, I think it goes back to when you set up your course, to make sure that you've got a marking schedule that's going to be as manageable as possible. Now, if you've got all of a sudden the term assignment coming in, and you've got a quiz to mark, and you've got the final exam coming up, you're going to have a huge crunch. If you can stage things so you minimize the chance of that crunch sort of thing happening, that'll make a big difference. I always try to make sure that my exams and assignments are returned within a week. So I'll use that as a guideline, sooner if possible, but no later than a week. If there's lots to do, sometimes that's just how it is. You've got to crunch as things coming in. I look for ways to stay sane, so I'll set goals. I'll, for example, mark 10, and then I'll give myself a treat or take a break, and then I'll do another 10, and so on, and just chip away at it that way. But one of the risks there is consistency. One has to stay consistent. So setting up a good marking guide is really helpful. Well, it's critical, actually. And that'll really help in facilitating the consistency. And then also other things, find out what's the best time of day for you for marking. Like early morning is good for me, although I find I mark best when I've got to get them back the next day, and so the crunch time is actually on. But there are those kinds of techniques that I found really useful.
Yeah, I can say that I think the big key there is having criteria, like a checklist of some kind, and always you would want to offer comments as well as just numbers. I think nothing makes students less happy than getting, 4 out of 10, but no explanation why. Almost as, 10 out of 10, no explanation why. So I think that and what I've evolved over the years is a criteria that shows how I will be marking it, and that goes out with the assignment. So everybody knows up front, this is what it's going to be marked on. I use that exact form and hand it back with those marks. So numbers out of 5 for presentation, numbers out of 10 for content or whatever. And I find only by breaking it down like that can I face that giant pile. I know I've heard of instructors in courses that are political science or history or courses where there's a lot of writing involved, using voice recognition software so they can actually speak comments into their computer and have it generated as a written document, which I think would be huge for offering comments. I think if I had to do much more than, for example, marking drawings, that's big drafted plans of things, and having to go and make notes and pick things out of that, that's where I get bogged down. That always comes in the fall, in October, November, and I just sort of dread that portion every year with the number of hours I know I'm going to be spending. Happily, that time coincides with usually not very nice weather outside, and I can sort of mark while I'm watching baseball or something too.
Another technique that I've heard being used, which I think is terrific, is to have to develop a composite answer exam that you give back to all the students. So you'll find that one student gave this particular answer to this question, and it was an excellent answer. So you'll put that in the composite final along with others, and then you'll make that available to students so they can see how what an excellent exam or an excellent report would look like, and can compare then their own marks to it.
That is a challenge.
Yes, it is. I find I sort of get into a mode. Once the term is underway and things start coming in, it's like I just know that evenings and many weekends I'm going to be spending some time doing marking. And it would be nice not to have to. And I do try to use some techniques that mean that I don't have to mark everything really thoroughly. So I'll have students do peer editing first before they might submit something, or I may have students developing a kind of portfolio, and then they can select 2 or 3 items out of that portfolio at certain intervals in the term and have me mark only those. But really I find that the more feedback students get, the better for them, and so I just accept that it's a part of the job, and so that's...
Do you set up marking criteria, like
Oh, yes.
a grading sheet?
I do, and I include it in the course outline, and that's all on my website as well, so students know exactly what I'm looking for, and that's for assignments they hand in or presentations. I mean, everything right down to the last mark that I give is clearly outlined, and that's actually a good way for them to check to make sure that they have everything covered. So for a presentation, for example, they know they have a solid introduction, and there are several components I'm looking for there, and the conclusion is also solid, and so it's actually a really good checklist for them to have that criteria sheet ahead of time. Yeah.
Well, I actually start at a couple of weeks before each semester when I'm developing course outlines with a large calendar, spreading the 4 months out. And then I'll take my courses and look at the midterms, the finals, and the various assignments. And I make sure that I've got a bit of spread so that I don't have 3 or 4 assignments coming in all at once, because that is totally overwhelming. And let's face it, you're at the college all day teaching. I think we are entitled to have a life in the evening and not have to go home and mark every evening. So when there is lots of marking, first of all, making sure that you've spread it out in some way is one strategy I begin with. I also vary the types of assignments. If it's first year students, my expectations aren't as high as it is for second year students. I do use more templates and provide the students with a template. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm marking for. You have them. These are the elements I'm looking for. It makes it easier to mark. Whereas second year, I'm looking more at a term paper, a research paper, 8 to 10 pages, and I'm providing feedback at a very different kind of level, and it's more work intensive. And so I'll spread those out then in terms of my marking semester, in terms of due dates, to provide myself with the time to go through those. And piles of 5 really helps. I do stack my papers in piles of 5, because when I finish 5, I can see that pile's done. I've made it that much further. Right.
So it's simple strategies like that too that
Right.
help make it easier.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you do after you've done 5?
Well, if it's in the context of an evening and it's a 10-page paper, I've marked 50 pages. That's enough. That's my limit for that one night quite frequently.
Yeah.
So depending on, whether it's a Saturday and I'm marking, I might strategize at getting 10 done. And then I have a visible goal as well in terms of, working through that pile. Yeah. Or I reward myself in some way. Time for tea or whatever.
I divide my marking pile in half. Yeah, I don't have such small piles. I have half, and when I'm done half of it, it feels good. I'm done half.
Right.
So, but the flip side to what you were talking about, Karen, is that I will also check with students to make sure that they're not being too overloaded with assignments in a particular week. And if they are, I let them know that I can be flexible with some of mine and move them around a little bit too. Because if they've got 6 assignments or tests in one week, I'm not going to get their best work for my class. So I'd rather shift something and maybe give myself a little bit of extra work, but know that I'm going to get a better quality assignment from them.
Yeah.
So
I do that too, and then I ask them, is it okay with you if I'm a week later in returning them, because we've both made adjustments and it might overlap with other piles of marking, and students are pretty understanding as well.